Energy pyramids, food webs, and food chains.
The overview. Food webs are comprised of the interactions between species in multiple food chains. The energy pyramids represent the passing of energy between the species in food chains and pyramids. They're visual representations of how energy is passed between the levels of food chains and food webs. Producers are organisms that make their own food through photosynthesis. The primary consumers are consumers who eat the producers. The secondary consumers are consumers who eat primary consumers. And the tertiary consumers are consumers who eat secondary consumers.
The visual representation to the right of the screen represents the steps of an energy pyramid labeled with their trophic levels. Energy pyramids. Energy pyramids aren't actual pyramids, but rather a stepped representation of the energy within trophic levels. 10% of energy is passed as carbohydrates or carbon compounds onto the next level. The remaining 90% is lost as heat. Each bar is proportional to the amount of energy in each level. In the visual representation to the right, another energy pyramid is shown, representing how 10% of the energy is passed between each level.
Food chains. The food chains are a sequence of organisms in which each organism feeds on the prior. Demonstrates how species interact within an ecosystem. The eating or being eaten of different organisms as well. An example would be a producer, a primary consumer, a secondary consumer, and a tertiary consumer.
In the visual representation below, grass is a producer, while a grasshopper eats the grass, making it a primary consumer. A frog consumes the grasshopper, making it a secondary consumer, and a python consumes the frog, making it a tertiary consumer. Food webs. Multiple food chains interconnected to demonstrate multiple feeding relationships between them. They demonstrate how one predator can feed on more than one organism. They help to visualize competition between species for food in an ecosystem. Question 1. How many tertiary levels does the frog occupy in the web pictured? A. Primary consumer. B. Secondary consumer. C. Tertiary consumer. Or D. Both secondary consumer and tertiary consumer.
Question 2. If a producer has 1,000 units of energy, how much energy would a primary consumer have? A. 100 units. B. 10 units. C. 10,000 units. Or D. 1 unit.
Question 3. Find and name 2 food chains of at least 3 species in the food web pictured. Answers will vary.
Question 4. Why can there not be an infinite number of organisms in a food chain? Let's see what your answers were.
For question 1, it said, how many tertiary levels does the frog occupy in the web pictured? The answer is D, because the frog is both a secondary and a tertiary consumer.
For number 2, the question was asking if a producer has 1,000 units of energy, how much energy would a primary consumer have? The answer was A. Since only 10% of the energy is passed on to the next trophic level, there would only be 100 units left for the primary consumer.
Question 3 was asking you to find and name at least 2 food chains of 3 species in the food web pictured. This is an example of a food chain you could have named. Answers for this question will vary.
Question 4 was asking why can there not be an infinite number of organisms in a food chain? Since only 10% of the energy is passed on between levels, there won't be as many resources for each level to continue to consume since only 10% is passed.